And welcome to episode 25, What to Do on a Cloudy Night with the Actual Astronomy podcast, where we actually talk about amateur astronomy. But in this episode, we're going to talk about reading books because it's been really cloudy.
Yeah, it's time for armchair astronomy because we haven't been able to get out.
Yeah, exactly. So Shane, this is the episode 25. 25 seems like a fairly big milestone for some reason, at least to me anyway. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it is a neat milestone. Us being new to this whole podcasting world, there's a lot of firsts. So yeah, it's kind of neat. I
Yeah,
wasn't sure how
well,
far we would get or where we would end up, but I'm enjoying it, and hopefully the listeners are too.
well, we did it a while back. Like I was actually going to say before we came on here that I did find one of our old scripts back from,
Oh,
I think it was like 2011.
okay.
And I read it for like 30. It was very painful. It was in May. And so what I was doing back in May this year is I was going back in, I think in June, to check something that we had done in a podcast. And we keep very loose notes now. Those notes were not loose. It was more scripted, I think is the way to put it. And a lot more work.
Yeah. Well, I remember you had like coyote howls and
Oh,
crickets chirping. it was
oh,
it was fun.
it was fun, but it would have been fun. Like maybe we'll do one like that again sometime, but it was so much work. Remember that?
Yeah.
And we'd also like set up like a web page for each episode.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. Yeah.
and I mean, boy, that was, and I mean, not even just like, it was like what to observe in the nighttime sky. I would do like custom maps and all kinds of bonus stuff. And like people loved it, but man, like even if it was a full-time job, it would be a full-time job.
Yeah. There wasn't the infrastructure, like the podcast infrastructure that there is now that just makes it a lot easier to do, to record and upload the episode.
Well, yeah, excuse me. I did like make some pretty detailed notes for like actually how to upload them, and then kind of get the feed out there and join it up with the Apple iTunes environments. And yeah, it was like major surgery putting each one of those out. So that's why. And on this one, you're doing all that anyway. So I'm like, when you said you were up for doing that, I was like, great, because that was the big barrier to me anyway, to actually hop back in and start doing podcasting again, because I just really didn't like all that post production very much. And then you and I agreed pretty readily that we wouldn't do any editing.
Yeah. There's very little editing that's
so
done.
so we are solely responsible for any errors, omissions, and problems that we generate. But yeah, I think it's better. I think I look forward to it, and then it's great when it's done. I think you just sort of line them up and then put them out there. I do the recording, but it's less than 5 more minutes of work a week, and so it's really wonderful. So thank you so much for kind of reinvigorating this.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it, and we're having fun, so that's good.
Yeah, and lots of people are listening. We're at this morning. I think I said earlier. I don't know what we're at now, but we were at 1,125 downloads.
Yeah, that's a great sign. People are listening, and that makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, well, it makes me a little bit nervous. Like I'm like, I don't think it's all the same individuals who are downloading, and it's great. But yeah, I was really surprised at the fact that so many people had, like, I can no longer say, well, it's just Shane testing, you know.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So for this episode 25, where we're not going to talk as much about the doing of astronomy, we're going to talk about books, which is my other great love in astronomy.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of nights where either the sky conditions don't allow us to go out and observe, or sometimes too, just life, leaves you kind of tired, right? And you don't feel like hauling a telescope out to observe. But it doesn't mean we're not still kind of enjoying the hobby. There's a lot of different ways to sit back in a comfortable chair indoors and still kind of be immersed in astronomy.
Yeah, and we also have recommended a few books so far. Few of the books that we recommended are, in particular, I think anybody who's really interested in astronomy, regardless of where they are, should buy the book Night Watch by Terrence Dickinson. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say at all. That is, at least in my opinion, and I think in many other people's opinions, this is the best book on getting started in amateur astronomy. Um, I don't know if you have another one that you can think of, Shane, but that definitely is, I think, the best book.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. It gives you an overview of all of the constellations, some bright objects within them, how to use your telescope, how to star hop. It's really everything you need to get going. The only other one I might throw into that category would be the Sky and Telescope Pocket Atlas. It's cheap, I think it's $20. It's more detailed, more objects than what Night Watch provides. But that atlas can last you a lifetime and
Yeah,
provides you a lot of different objects to
yeah.
see.
And it's an atlas. It's not a how to or anything like that. So I kind of, yeah, I think that is a perfect recommendation for an atlas. But definitely people can get started with Night Watch. I think Night Watch is the very first thing to get. And of course, there's also the Backyard Astronomer's Guide, which was the first book somebody bought me for astronomy. However, it's not that much of a how-to on astronomy. It's like a general overview on astronomy. There's more of an equipment focus, um, a bit of an astrophotography focus. I know Alan Dyer, who's the co-author with Dickinson on that one, has recently been telling me that he updated the astrophoto section. So I know in the next one they put out, whenever that's coming in coming months, it has been updated again. But beyond that, what is do you have a favorite astronomy book, Shane?
Yeah, it's kind of a hard question to answer because I have a lot of books I really really enjoy, but the one that probably I go back to the most frequently, it's more of a like a guide or an observing handbook, and it's the Observing Handbook and Catalog of Deep Sky Objects
Oh, the Logan
by.
Dillon's gift book, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a fantastic book. Do you have that one, Chris?
Yeah, I have a couple copies of that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
bought a copy and it had, I didn't realize I picked it up at like again, a telescope going in a business store. I had flipped through it, like not real careful. It was on sale. It was very inexpensive. And I got home and it was like cut in two, and then it had like a duplication of the first section in the second section. So I had like instead of having 50, I think it has all 88 constellations or something like that. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
I think it had like the first 44 for the northern hemisphere, and then had the 44 again, like all like something like that. Anyway, it's some sort of print set error. And so knowing that, actually, a friend of mine gave me his copy because he said he just wasn't using it anymore. That's a great book.
Yeah, I love it because it has a couple thousand objects in there. It has like observing notes of what you expect to see at the eyepiece done by a visual astronomer, which is almost like reading an observing log. And for a number of the objects, they give you a description of what it looks like through telescopes of varying aperture. And in some cases, what it even looks like through binoculars. Now, the range of aperture for the descriptions is anywhere from a kind of a binocular description all the way up to a 30 centimeter telescope. So that would be like a 12-inch, which
Yeah.
all of that is within the range of a amateur observer. Some of the guides out there, like you and I both have the Interstellarium, and there's a guide that comes with that, and that guide also shows a bunch of different objects. A lot of them are sketches with varying apertures, but like I think predominantly the sketches are done through like a 27-inch Dobsonian, and that's just not many people have access to something that large. So while the image or the sketch might be pretty to look at, it really doesn't help me understand what I can see in the night sky
Yeah.
because I'm nowhere near that. So that's one of the reasons why I like this Observing Handbook and Catalog of Deep Sky Objects, because it tells me what I would probably see through the telescopes I have access to.
Now, if I'm recalling correctly, I believe that, and I could be wrong, but I believe that they did the observations on like the roof of the University of Arizona or something like that.
Oh, okay. I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, like way back, like I think 30 or more years ago, back before, long before you and I were even looking at buying telescopes when we were little kids or whatever. Yeah, that's my understanding of it. So that's just sort of a fun fact. Of course, now with all the light pollution, that might be more of a challenge. I don't know. Never been to Arizona.
Mhm.
My favorite book is Deep Sky Wonders by Walter Scott Houston. And I say book, it's comprised of the very best columns, at least as edited by Stephen O'Meara, who's a well-known amateur astronomer and writer as well. And what it is Walter Scott Houston was a columnist, and he had a column in the Sky and Telescope magazine for many decades called Deep Sky Wonders. And in the late 90s, um, well, he passed away, I believe, in 94. And then very soon after, what they did, or what Stephen O'Meara did, is he went through all the columns and then edited together the best sections, kind of on a month-to-month basis. Um, and it's like a narrative. It's almost like a story, even though they're these in some ways unconnected um, columns that he's kind of edited together to make into these sort of month to month sections. It works really well. It's very well edited. With one, did you ever read this book?
I have not. No.
With one sort of odd critique from me, I suppose. I've never heard anybody else say it, and that's that I found, like, for whatever reason, there's not much in there on, like, the summer Milky Way. Not really that much about it. In the summer months, it says something like, people usually don't observe the northern sky in the summer, and now we're going to talk about that. It's like, why would you? But anyway, apart from that, it's an excellent book. I just love the writing by Walter Scott Houston. Now, there's other Deep Sky Wonder books out. Sue French has put out two books called Deep Sky Wonders, and Sue French was the columnist who took over from Walter Scott Houston when he passed away in the 90s. And she has a slightly different approach. Whereas Walter Scott Houston, what he was doing is he was very much like generating like a narrative of amateur astronomy combined with observations, and he used pretty antiquated like Alvin and Clark refractor and some things like that. Whereas Sue French is a little bit more of the hands-on observing and more of a like how to observe these kind of objects. And all sets worth owning. Her book, she put out two. She put out one. It was pretty successful. It was a very thin book. I don't know how many pages it was, and I bought that. It was almost like a magazine. I don't even know if it's still available. And then there's like a really expanded version of that, which is printed by Firefly Books here in Canada, which is the same publisher as the Terrence Dickinson books that we recommended earlier. And it's good, but I really love the story style of Walter Scott Houston's book, is edited by Stephen O'Meara, because it very much kind of gives you the story of that month. And I just really love that. It's not just about the observing. It's sort of that aesthetic of observing, I suppose, is the way to put it. You really get that sort of feeling and that sense. And then, like, you can go buy Sue French's book and kind of get her take as well, which is more of a practical, hands-on. Like, this is how you go and observe this stuff, and she has charts and everything like that. So between the two, I think it's a really nice set.
Oh yeah, that sounds like, especially the Houston book sounds quite interesting. I'll have to check that out. Does O'Meara's Secret Deep, which we'll probably get into a little more discussion about,
Sure.
is it sort of a carry-on of that Deep Sky Wonder?
Well, I have a couple series that I kind of had written down here. So Stephen O'Meara has a series of books starting with I think it's called like the Messier album or the Messier objects. I guess the Messier objects, and then he has the Caldwell objects and hidden treasures. And then what was the other one? The Secret Deep, is that the one you referenced? And
Secret Deep and Southern Gems.
Southern Gems, yeah. So he's got a set. They're pretty big and heavy. I mean, the Messier one is like regular book size, and then kind of as you progress through them, they look like a Stephen King novel or bigger. They're quite hefty.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, they're a little different. They're kind of an in between. It's a beautiful series, and where Stephen O'Meara will dive into a particular subset of objects, and then he will detail out typically some astrophysical data, his observations, some interesting stuff about them. And what's great about Stephen Amira's book series is that he's observing with like around 4 and 5 inch instruments and doing some sketching. I think most of the books, sort of are based around his sketches. I know some of the more recent ones had astrophotos. It's a great series. It's a little dense. You kind of pick it up and you read through a few objects, and then you've probably had your fill. Like it really is a lot of information. He goes through like the whole history of whatever object it is he's discussing, and it's a story, but it's not quite a reference. It's not quite a reference, and it's not quite a narrative. Would that be a fair assessment from your side of things?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good description. I have them all. Well, not the Messier objects or the Caldwell objects. I have the Hidden Treasures, Secret Deep, and Southern Gems. And I like his writing style. It's very engaging, but there's sometimes that I kind of wished it was like itemized a little differently, like maybe a section or a heading that would say, the observational log or something like that for the object. Because sometimes that's all I really want to get into is, what does
Yeah,
this thing look like, as opposed to the grand story around the object. But it's very informative, very good, and I love those books. They're great. And
yeah, they
like you
are.
said, the fact that he's doing it with, again, a 4-inch telescope, I think, for the first 1 or 2 or 3 books, and then I think he moved on to a 5-inch refractor. Again, very modest telescopes that are readily available to the amateur astronomer. So
Yeah,
in fact, that's largely what you and I observe with, are 4 and 5 inch refractors. So it's really neat to have some guides like that, especially for some objects that aren't part of the common lists, like the
yeah,
Messier list or the NGC, like the finest NGC,
yeah.
and there's a bunch of other lists out there. Omira really keys on some unique objects that are interesting to look at.
Yeah, I really enjoy that series as well, and it's very well written and it's well referenced. It is a great series. Another series, and I have quite a few from the Patrick Moore. I call it sort of like the How to Observe series, which is put out by Springer. These ones can vary quite a bit. There's some of them that are just excellent, and then there's some that it just kind of a bit of a head scratch what they're going on about. I think there's one on observing under dark skies, and I got it. I was really excited, and it was all about like electronically assisted observing. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
like, or like, there was maybe it was the Dark Nebula one, and it was like, well, you can't see Dark Nebula with your eye. And I'm like, well, I can. That's why I bought this book. I mean, why would you write a book on something anyway? And then they went on about how they were doing it with electronically assisted astronomy, which isn't really what we do. It's something very different. And so I kind of was sort of taken aback by that. And yeah, and they all kind of followed the same thing where they kind of talk about this is the equipment you need, and that kind of stuff. Quite long length, and yeah, so there's quite a repetition. Um, and one of my favorite authors in the series, though, I'll say this, is or was, unfortunately passed away, was Peter Grago. He wrote the one on Mars and the one on Mercury and Venus, and those ones are really, really good. They are meaty. He goes into some pretty fine detail. As an amateur, he was an excellent observer of the planets. And anyway, so the ones by Peter Grago are excellent. The ones on the planets in particular, I think, are all in general quite good. I think I know the author of the Neptune and Uranus book, but I haven't been able to track that one down. So I'd actually end up writing him. Richard Schmoody, I think, is the author of that one. I believe anyway. And yeah, I might actually reach out to him, see if I can get a copy. But yeah, the ones on the planets are good. The ones on the other topics, I'm not as much of a fan of. But I've got quite a library. I don't know. Like, do you have quite a few astronomy books, Shane?
Quite a few, yeah, yeah. And maybe just while we're kind of on the tail end of that Springer series by Patrick Moore, I have the Observing and Measuring Visual Double Stars book. That's part of that
Okay,
Practical
is it
Astronomy
good?
series. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, if somebody is interested in double stars, this will tell you everything you need to know, and probably way beyond that,
Yeah.
because it really gets into kind of almost citizen science of actually measuring double stars, which is really fascinating. And it's something that some amateurs do get into. This
Yeah.
book will tell you all about that. But also just a great primer in general for double stars, which is something I'm kind of fascinated by. I do enjoy looking at them, particularly from the backyard, because light pollution really doesn't impact it. So it is a nice backyard project.
Yeah, I don't mind double stars, although, to be honest, I'm more of a double espresso fan than double star fan. But
Fair enough.
I've got a lot of reference books. So like kind of when I always thought it was neat, like reading O'Meara and Sue French and others. They would make these references to, past observations. And I'd always kind of say, oh, well, like I really want to get that or this reference book so that I could do some of my own writing, because I do a fair bit of my own astronomy writing for the journal and the handbook. And so I've very quickly accumulated all those. So one of the more recent ones that's come out in the past decade was Observing Cataloging Nebula and Star Clusters by Wolfgang Steinecke. I don't know if you've read that or not.
I have not.
And it is amazing. It is just an incredible book. Now, although it's a reference book, there's lots of stories in it. So it is probably the best cloudy night book that you don't own, Shane. You should go and buy this. It's not inexpensive, but you can kind of just sit down. You can open it up. You can read about comet hunters and other observers. Has like some more obscure stories about the observers. Kind of lists out a lot of different, all the nebulas and star clusters that we would be familiar with. So it goes into some of the more interesting details. It is extremely well written. It's pretty dense though. Like it is, like a 3 or 4 pound book kind of thing. And it's got a lot of material in there. And again, you kind of sit down, you read a story or two from it, and then you can kind of put it down and then not pick it up for some time. Another one is Star Clusters by Archnell and Hines. And this book, Star Clusters, is more of a reference book. And in that, it lists pretty much as much as possible all of the open and globular clusters in the nighttime sky. And so if you're looking at a cluster and you're wondering anything about it, it's going to be in there. Although it's a little bit dated now. It's around almost 20 years old, I think, give or take. But for the most part, that is reasonably up to date as far as like amateur information goes, and it's a good place to start. I don't know. Have you taken a look at the Star Clusters book?
No, I have not seen that one either. Sounds interesting though. And as you're giving these descriptions, I'm adding to my Amazon wish list.
Yeah, I think I sent you this list earlier today. Another one, and this one is a smaller book. Again, it's a reference, and all of these I really like a lot. So I'm not really going to pick any favorites here. Is the Bedford Catalog by Admiral Smythe, and that book is so cool. This guy was a sea captain turned almost like a professional astronomer, and did this wonderful work going through the nighttime sky, deep sky objects and double stars and everything. Really comprehensive, extremely well written. Written, I think, in 1844 or something like that. Like I'm kind of recalling this off the top of my head, but it is of some age, but it really gives you sort of that historical perspective. And of course, with these small instruments that we're using, much of the information, apart from sort of the astrophysical data, which can change as we talked about with the Coat-Hanger cluster in the last episode. Apart from that, like the visual description and all that kind of stuff is really not changing that much over time. Do you have a copy of this? I feel like you do have a copy of this.
Of the Bedford catalog?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
You should get that, because it's not. It's a nice one. It's small, and yeah, it's this really nice small book, and it really jams in a lot of material. Now the next one, I know you did buy one volume of it, is a 2-volume set. It's called the Celestial Objects for Common Telescopes.
Yes, I have volume 2, I think, the one about
That's
stars.
the Deep Sky one, yeah.
Deep Sky, yeah.
So there's volume 1 and 2. I bought both. The same place I bought the Longabule and Skiff book, although this set worked out a little bit better for me. And the first volume is on the planets, and it is just astounding. It's by a guy named Webb, and it was written, I think, originally in like the late 1800s, and then revised in the early 1900s. And then most copies they were hard to get for a long time. And then in the 60s, they printed tons and tons of them, so it's really easy to find used. Um, and like I said, the first volume is on the planets. It is amazing, and the second volume is on the deep sky, and it's really, really good. The first volume is more narrative, so it's actually telling you more of a story of the observing of the planets. The second volume is just more detail. So you're looking at an object and you look it up, and you can find it in there, and it's not really like a page turner. The first volume, though, goes into some of the stories on the observing. So it's quite interesting. What did you think of it so far?
I like it. Yeah, it's very interesting. I haven't gotten too far into it. I'm currently just finishing up a really old book that you got me onto. Oh, what the heck is it called now? It's Through the Telescope by James. Uh, I don't know how you say his name. Bakey, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, that book was written a long time ago, and um, I think like in the 1800s with modest equipment, but I'm fascinated by their planetary observations, and it just
Was
gives you
this
an idea of what you're able to see.
was this like an online book?
Yeah, it's on
Okay.
Project Gutenberg, so it's free.
Okay.
You can grab it from there, and away you go.
Yeah, and I mean that's actually a great place, Project Gutenberg. You can just Google that. I'm not going to try to spell Gutenberg, but it's just like the Gutenberg Bible fame. And free books, online, digital. There's also the Internet Archive has tons and tons of free books, and in fact, some of these you might be able to find on there, like probably the Bedford Catalog and Celestial Objects are on there, I believe. And there's lots and lots of other ones, just excellent volumes of text. Because one thing I find, like sometimes, like the old pages can bother me a bit because they get like that musty, mildewy smell. And so I've actually bought books and then sold them because of that. Some people it doesn't bother at all, and then I just use the online versions.
Yeah, it's a great option. And, you know, some of the times too, like especially with these old books, is, just they're hard to find in physical copies of them. So, if you can get it online, it's often free and easy to read.
Do you have a copy of Burnham's Celestial Handbook?
I have all 3 volumes. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And do you have
In
the
fact,
hardcover or the soft cover?
well, I have the hardcover and the e-version on my Kindle.
Okay, yeah, I think I recall you talking about the e-version before. So what is Burnham's Celestial Handbook?
Well, it's like a collection of, well, so 3 volumes that are split up amongst like varying constellations, and then for each constellation, he goes into great detail of double stars, variable stars, galaxies, nebulas, basically everything to observe within that constellation. Uh, Gives you some observing notes or kind of descriptions of what you'll see, some of the historical references to the constellation. It's a fantastic read. There's a lot of great narrative around the objects that you would look at.
So one of the ways, like I was sort of lucky in a way, and I'm lucky in many ways, I suppose. But the reason why I have such an extensive library is I lived and worked in Waterloo for a while, and just south of Waterloo is Kitchener, and that's really where I was working. People are familiar with the area, and this is in Ontario. And there were 2 bookstores. I would go for a walk every day on my lunch hour, and there were 2 amazing used bookstores, and they would just get stuff in. And so if I was in or they're like, oh yeah, like lots of people would come there for whatever reason. I don't know why it was, because there was like a good astronomy club and there was some telescope stores nearby. I don't know if that was it or what, but they would get in tons of astronomy books. And I walked in one day and they had gotten it, and though Burnham's Celestial Handbook hadn't been, published in decades, they had a brand new set I already owned a set, but it was the paper copy, and mine had kind of been damaged. I'd taken it out in the nighttime sky. I think I had spilt like a glass of water on it. It was like in rough shape. I think I had even accidentally ripped one of the covers off. I don't know why. And so I bought this, got this brand new copy. I think I paid like, it wasn't inexpensive. I think it was like $19 a book. So there's 3 copies. So I think I paid around $60 for it. But yeah, just amazing, just amazing to have that. But yeah, I was very fortunate. I would just go there. It was about a 15-minute walk to the first one, and I would kind of walk out there. It was sort of on the apex of the walk, and then about halfway back, sort of coming down the other side of the loop, there was a smaller, not quite as extensive bookstore, and I would go in there, and I would, probably at least once a month, I would find a pretty good treasure there. Like I found the Dolphus Atlas of the Planets at that one. I found Atlas of the Galaxies. Um, sometimes for like $5 or $6,
Wow.
and yeah, just phenomenal books. And sometimes I'd ask, it's, hey, can you get this? And they would kind of go through their channels and bring a book in. So probably 80% of my library, excuse me, came from that process. So I was pretty lucky. Any other sort of reference books that you have on your
Um,
shelf of interest?
I guess this is probably more of an atlas, but and I think we actually talked about it on our atlas episode a little while ago. But the Cambridge Photographic Star Atlas is just a
Oh
fun one
yeah,
to page through on the
yeah,
couch because you're really seeing what the night sky looks like pretty much naked eye, or maybe through binoculars would be a better description. But it's a wonderful text just to familiarize yourself with like some constellations or some areas of the sky that you might want to observe. One of the things I like to do on those cloudy nights is think about, okay, next time I go out, what do I want to see? And then I may research, uh, the constellation or the star field just so that I'm able to locate that object a little bit quicker when I'm actually out there.
yeah. And sort of in some shameless self-promotion, if one's looking for another great reference book, might be the RASC Observer's Handbook, of which I'm a contributing author for 3 sections.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
last year we observed, like you wrote an article about objects in Cassiopeia, which we observed one night at Grasslands, and it was
yeah,
a lot of fun.
yeah. So I mean, you can actually read some of the observing that we've done together. I mean, typically we do that if it lines up, and probably about half the time, like those observations that are included in there, or kind of the base of the work is based on like a session you and I and Mike and Rick have had under the nighttime sky. So it is kind of neat to sort of have that, and I probably have about another 60 or 70 years of content to go for that project.
That's awesome.
We'll see.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So I tagged on a few binocular books, sort of for the end of this. So um, we're big fans. I think that's a fair assessment. You and I are big fans of binocular astronomy.
Yeah, yeah. We've said it before. There's sometimes we go down to our dark sky site and the telescopes never get unpacked because we just take out the binoculars, sit back in a comfortable chair, and that's how we take in the night sky for an entire night. And it's really rewarding.
Yeah, and I mean, there's even nights where if we didn't have the binoculars, we probably wouldn't be doing astronomy. I think of a lot of those nights, like you were saying early on, or maybe it was in the past episode, where it rains and then it clears off in the grasslands, and that's great. Like we have clear skies, but everything is really damp, and you take the telescope out, it's going to get covered in dew, and sometimes if it's not too bad, we'll do it. But there's nights where we have mist rolling around, like little fog banks are rolling in and out. Sometimes we have to like change positions and walk like 100 meters or 200 or 300 feet over in a different direction. We can be in complete clear skies again, but the place we just were is completely enshrouded in mist and fog and that kind of stuff. The binoculars are perfect for that, and we get some great sessions in, and it's really fun because all of our binoculars are different. Like you have your 12 by 36s, I've got a pair of 7 by 35s, Mike has 15 by 50s. Some other people usually are there with, excuse me, like 8 power binoculars or 10 power binoculars. And kind of sometimes what we'll do is just sort of sit around in a circle and just kind of pass the binoculars around. And that's always so much fun.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. And there's like the summertime Milky Way is just a fantastic region of the sky to, gaze through with binoculars and just pan that entire area. There's so much to see.
So I've got a short list of binoculars here, but do you have any favorite binocular books?
Omira has a good one that I have.
Oh,
And
I think I remember that. It's a pretty thin little book, if I recall.
yeah, it is pretty thin. I can't think of the name. Why don't you go on with yours and I'll figure out what
Yeah,
mine
yeah.
are.
Just look it up or something. Yeah, I remember. I think you brought that out to one of the sessions, or actually, I think you lent that to me once, and I read it. And it's kind of a page turner. It's a good read, and I don't think it's very expensive. But I kind of sat down an afternoon and read it. It's quite nice. But this is a book, my favorite book. You don't judge it by its cover because the cover art is a bit elementary, maybe is the way to put it. But it's Binocular Astronomy by Craig Crossan, and it is phenomenal. It just makes you want to go observing. He has a wonderful mix of visual observing as well as sort of the history of the constellations, and then really great, at least according to me anyway, really nice sort of cultural perspective on astronomy as well. Beautifully all tied in together, goes into some of the Egyptian hieroglyphics, all kinds of different things like that. It's just fascinating, beautifully written, well photographed, well laid out, well thought out. Has a copy of a couple different types of all sky star charts, a little bit deeper star chart in the back with a magnitude 6 star chart. Just an awesome, awesome book for doing binocular astronomy. I mean, really, you could get Night Watch, Binocular Astronomy, and Deep Sky Wonders. Those 3 books. If I had to recommend 3 books to anybody, those would be the 3 books. Those are just such great books. You can sit down, read them cover to cover, and just go right back and read them again. Those are my 3 favorite astronomy books. But also, Touring the Universe Through Binoculars by Phil Harrington is a wonderful reference for what you can see and what things will look like in a small handheld pair of binoculars. Very concentrated. You go through constellation by constellation. He details out binoculars a little bit more in that than in Craig Crossan's book, and it's very easy to read. And this is important. We're all aging here. It's got a large text font, and I say that it really is very easy to read. A lot of the astronomy books are a little bit dense, and the print is small, and it's fine. Like I don't have trouble with that. A lot of people don't. But if you're out on the nighttime sky and you're using red flashlight, that's really hard to read. But Harrington, I think, thought of this. And so you can actually take his book out under the nighttime sky and have no problem reading it at all with your red flashlight. And then it's also pretty easy to sit around and read just his reference notes. And he goes on a variety of different topics. He has a really good section on observing the moon with binoculars too. Do you have a copy of Touring the Universe Through Binoculars?
No, I don't. No, the only one I have is that Omira one, which I did find the title. Where the heck did I put? Oh, it's Observing the Night Sky with Binoculars, a Simple Guide. So
By Stephen Amira.
By Stephen James O'Meara. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. You should. I mean, you can borrow Touring the Universe Through Binoculars. I have a copy. You're welcome to borrow it. I got to keep a handle on my books here for the next 6 weeks while I write my next section for the handbook, because I kind of sort of take an afternoon and spread them all out and figure out what I'm doing, and then go through and put all my sticky notes in, and then sit down and pound it out. So I kind of have to start that process here once we get in better weather. I like to sit outside and do it. I don't know why. It's the only thing I write outside. I feel like for some reason I have to write outside. I think when I started writing these sections for the handbook, I actually started writing them in the grasslands, and I actually sat outside on the lawn there, which is now a day use area, and I wrote the first section sitting down there all by myself before people started going to that national park. So kind of
Oh,
stuff.
wow.
Yeah. Another great book, and this isn't necessarily a dedicated binocular book. It's a bit of a wide field book. It's a little dense. It's also by Craig Crossan. It's sort of a tertiary recommendation, I suppose. and it's called Sky Vistas. And the reason for this recommendation is that it's just such a beautiful book to look at. It's one of the most beautiful astronomy books that I have. And he talks about observing through large binoculars and wide field telescopes. Of course, I think of myself as a wide field observer, and so I really enjoy that aspect of it. It can be a bit dense at times. It's well written, but it's not really an introductory book, and there's no real charts for finding the stuff. You're kind of assumed to know your way around the nighttime sky. But there's a lot of pictures. There's at least one large picture section in it. It's got a very nice cover on it, and that's Sky Vistas by Craig Crossan. But yeah, if I was to recommend 3 astronomy books that if anybody's really interested in astronomy, would be the Night Watch. It would be Binocular Astronomy, and then you could kind of pick one of a few different books, I suppose. But yeah, those are probably my 2 top books to pick. So I don't know about you, Shane, what you would recommend if somebody was looking to pick up a book on one night.
No, that sounds like a great list of books to start off with. And again, like a lot of the stuff we talk about, it's not even really beginner stuff. Like it's accessible by anybody. And if you get into some of these books, it really provides almost a lifetime of enjoyment and observing. So great recommendations. The only thing I might add to this whole conversation, and this will be fairly short because I think we've talked about a lot of this stuff already. But another thing I like to do on cloudy nights is sometimes just browse the internet. And, one of the best places to go for discussion is
Is Cloudy
cloudynightscom.
Nights, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes a lot of sense.
Strangely enough.
Yeah. So that's a great place to go. And then the other thing I like to do is sometimes just check out used gear. Astronomy, like any hobby, can be expensive, but if you buy stuff used, you often save that depreciation, and it allows you to test out some eyepieces. And if you like them, you keep them, and if you don't, you sell them for the same price that you bought them for. So Cloudy Nights has a classified section. Astromart.com. They also have like a fairly extensive classified section. And then, you and I being in Canada, the Canadian site is astrobuysell.com. So, I like to check those 3 or 4 websites out, on a somewhat regular basis, when I'm not able to take my telescope out.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking of, sort of a little bit off topic, is that we are in Canada, we actually live pretty close to the American border. We're only, about 100 kilometers north of North Dakota here. And we often vacation in the United States and have friends, and I have some family down there and that sort of thing. So, although this is, where we are right now, we sometimes do go down south and do some observing. I certainly have done a fair bit of observing down in the States now at this time. So it's always great to get down there and, see some old friends and do some astronomy down there too.
Yeah. And, for us Northerners, the further south we get, it's kind of neat to open up some of those southern constellations.
Yeah, exactly. Well, do you have any other books or anything to add? We didn't talk about magazines or anything. There's really not that many astronomy magazines. We have Sky News here in Canada, which is a great sort of beginner magazine, and Sky and Telescope and Astronomy down in the States, Sky at Night, and I think it's called Astronomy Now or something like that in the UK, and that's kind of it. There might be a few other ones. Yeah.
No, I think this is a good discussion. We covered a lot of really good books. Any one of them would be a great addition to an astronomy library, and I think people will get some enjoyment out of these.
All right, sounds good. So do you want to let people know how they can stay in touch with us?
Sure. So you can find us on Twitter. We are at Actual Astronomy on Twitter. We send out notices every time a new podcast is released. But if you want to ask us questions, feel free to message us there. And if you have some suggestions for future episode topics, let us know, and we might be able to work that into our schedule.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear from people and just get some feedback. We're seeing so many people join as followers and so many downloads coming now. I think you were thinking as well as I was, like, oh, we should kind of open the 2-way communication channel and make sure that people can reach out, especially like we may we may make some mistakes or have some gaffes, and we do this in a very live way. So people should kind of understand that there may be some mistakes or gaffes that we make, and so we're definitely open to feedback and criticism, of course.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Shane. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
All right. We'll talk to you next week.
See you later.